to say thank you so much for everyone for coming here and for sort of supporting the launch of White Cloud Over Purple. Here it is, looking absolutely beautiful in this cover. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I just want to introduce fabulous guest readers that I've got here this evening. So we have Damien Donnelly, Wendy Allen, Mark Antony Owen, and Briony Collins, and I will give a kind of quick intro and bio for them before they start reading. So this, for those of you who may have seen something about the book or possibly even bought a copy, thank you if you have, is a book of sort of after poetry or ekphrastic poetry. So it all relates to other works of art or music or literature that it's inspired by. And I will talk a little bit more about that later, but I just want to point out that I am, of course, wearing a Rothko t-shirt. If you can see it, there it is. It's not the painting White Cloud Over Purple that the book is named after, but it is one of his later paintings that I refer to in the book. Anyway, that out of the way, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Damien Donnelly. So Damien is host and producer of the poetry podcast Eat the Storms and editor-in-chief of The Storms, a journal of poetry, prose and visual art. His debut pamphlet, Eat the Storms, was published by Hedgehog Poetry Press and nominated for a Pushcart Prize. It also features in the Poetry Book Society Winter List 2020 to 21. He followed that with the Pushcart Prize nominated Stickleback, which is a micro collection of ekphrastic poems, and then the collaboration Jitterfrizz of Neon. He has two collections out, two full collections, Enough, published also by Hedgehog in 2022, and earlier this year, his second full collection, Back from Away, was published by Turas Press. So please join me in welcoming the wonderful Damien Donnelly. I'm going to spotlight you, Damien, and hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. It's a joy to be here. The lineup is incredible, and to be here to support JP is just an honor. I have been such a fan of your work for such a long time now. Well, such a short, long time, because really we're both so young. So it's wonderful. Thank you so much for letting us all have a little early read. It really was a joy and an honor to be able to sort of go behind the scenes before everybody else got to see it. I'm going to stick with sort of the theme for the first three poems, and I'm going to read three ekphrastic pieces. It's based on a sequence of ekphrastic poems that I'm writing at the moment. So I'm going to share screen. There we go. Can you all see the screen? All right, so this is a short sequence of three poems, all inspired by three separate paintings by Paul Klee or Paul Klee. And the first one is called Choke. There are balloons in the desert. Red apples that have left the three, leftovers from Eden's blaze. Loss is a sandstorm. Jungles of children's building blocks. Every ending bringing us back to reset the beginning. Circle, square, rectangle, triangle, mother, father, gender, bender. You write who I am on a label and tape it to my back before I have learned to read the instructions in a language you promised I didn't need. Eat the storms, you said. But you meant swallow all that couldn't be placed in a box. There are balloons in the desert. Red apples we must try not to bite this time if we want to evolve. So speaking of evolving, so the second poem is based on his painting The Invention, and this is called User Instructions. The body is a box. The box contains a selection of accessories separating us from an empty box. This means the box of the body is not empty, but does not mean that the box cannot be emptied. Inside a fully equipped body of the box is an array of shapes and colours to be selected by the owner of the body and may be taken out of the box and distributed around the body day or night or even at the request of another body, curious about the shape and color of another's accessories. The initial decision of where to place the accessories when taken out is at the discretion of the owner of the body itself, who has read the instructions in a language they themselves have deemed to be essential. Later, the owner may allow another the same discretion. The manufacturer of the box takes no responsibility for what may happen if another body is allowed to empty the contents of your body's box in order to make you up. The body is a box, and each unique box contains a selection of accessories true to the individual body alone. The owner should see to their own assembly first and foremost. And the final poem from this little section is called The Retreat, early on, and based on the painting that you see here, the head of the man going senile. First glimpse of what it's like to be eaten slowly. There is no room for insecurity in the playground. You must learn this quickly. But no one will tell you this until it is too late. There are beasts in the jungle of the art, hungry to swallow all that others haven't learned has value. By lunchtime, you will have taught yourself to remove pieces in order to preserve. As a poet, I start with the mouth in order to hone words, like edges of blades, a Kruger on the inside of a Care Bear, build unspoken sentences, marching them like inner armies while tackling external corridors. By the second day, wear only one eyebrow, drop the left eye below the right, remove both ears, anything that can be a hook or can hear. Paint yourself with the yolk of a stale egg. Banish any hint of perfection. Too young to know you'll never be able to claim this. And I've decided to share a poem from the Storms Journal, issue 2, had to double check. And it is a poem by J.P. Seabright. So JP, I hope it's okay that I read your poem. So this is called Farther, Father. Take another step back, please. You're too close. Not close enough. Never been close. Except that one time you were so close. I was suffocating, held fast in your false embrace. You were so close. I was suffering the indignity of your tumescence, the fragility of my pubescence. Oh, God. Never been close. Except that one time in a photograph. I can see us kneeling on the ground, nearly touching. Eyes down, hands reaching, together fixing my bicycle. Tethering childhood memories to something solid, something real. A second-hand bike with a wonky wheel. So that was JP's poem, which I was honoured to be able to feature in The Storms. And again, congratulations, JP. Thank you so much for having us here. And so I read a poem about the father, and I thought, well, I will end by reading a poem about the mother. So this is from the new collection, Back From Away. And this is called Sewing Is Not For Everyone. She was a seamstress who couldn't sew. and settled for off the rack instead of odd one out. She accessorized well, adopting a child and big belts to cinch in the emptiness a machinist would have trimmed away. She tried out perms and detachable collars. Under the brim of an Easter bonnet hat of toilet paper hearts. Earning herself the pearls of a ladies' club, which she wore on Sundays for trips back to the village that hadn't taught her how to sew her way out of unexpected situations, like the weight of a necklace or that pinch of gold on fourth finger. Thank you all so very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Damien. That was wonderful. I mean, I love your work and I love hearing you read. You just read so beautifully, and great to see your ekphrastic poetry. And thank you for doing me the honor of reading one of my poems. I think far better than I ever could. So that was really lovely to hear that. Thank you. Very kind. And next up, we have another huge favourite of mine, which is Wendy Allen. So I'm going to quickly read your bio, Wendy. So Wendy Allen worked as cabin crew for 20 years before leaving in August 2020. She began writing poetry during lockdown. Her work has since appeared in Ambit, Poetry Wales, The Moth, Poetry Island, Review, The Rialto, The London Magazine. Oh my goodness, it's a long list. I'm sorry, I might give up there. Wendy's poetry centres around the theme of sex, menstruation, autofiction and art, specifically sculpture and the work of Barbara Hepworth. Her debut pamphlet, Plastic Tube, Little Bird, was published with Broken Sleep Books. She's also had a collaboration out with Broken Sleep Books. And her forthcoming full collection, Portrait in Mustard, is out, I think, very soon, this autumn. Is that right? With Seren Books.
Yeah, it's out next month. It's a pamphlet. It's not a full collection.
Oh, okay. Well,
but
I'm thrilled to be reading it. I can't wait to read it. Are you going to give us a little bit of a preview with some of your set tonight?
I am actually. I'm going to read all poems from it, apart from one, which is I noticed there was a comment about concrete. I have to do one of my concrete poems, as in a poem about concrete rather than a concrete poem. So I'm just going to read a few poems. But first of all, I want to say congratulations, JP. It's such a great thing that you do for everybody. Everybody who's here watching tonight probably feels the same as I do, that you do so much for the poetry community, but also in how you write as well. You inspire us all with how you tackle form and your kind of approach to poetry, and you make it such a welcoming place. So thank you and congratulations on your amazing book. So I'm going to read a few poems from my forthcoming pamphlet. I'm going to start off with Sex Life after Sarah Lucas. And I've also got dodgy internet, cheap internet. So if I do disappear, then I shall rejoin. It always disappears when I'm doing a reading. I want to replicate this statue with you. Between your lips, the uck of suck will taste perfect. The straining of breasts under lace, the tied tip of nipple like magenta balloons about to explode. The rolling of moan that makes the lace the third person in this freeze-frayed threesome. Unaware of what I'm thinking about, you are reflected in the part of bronze I look at. I imagine my mouth open with you inside, the 7 images of the artist eating a banana, watching from the side, and for a split second of contemplation of you in my mouth, oceanic depths of unrelated and unexpected emotion are exposed. I had never thought of bronze as round until this moment. This is a juxtaposition I didn't anticipate. From this angle, I am distorted. In the curve of metal flesh, I am a tiny rounded version of self. The green of jumpsuit floral is a dull metal gun in the gaze of this bronze physical. You can't see the angle folds in waist or the catalogue way it fits the hip or the reason I chose it. The next poem I'm going to read is one I've never read out before, but it's actually my favourite from my Portrait in Mustard. Page 77. She references feminism in her bio. It is, she says, her universal theme. When we see her in the scene, we don't trust her. The story she tells is implausible. She talks from an emotional perspective. She is making herself unreliable. How does the narrative show this? She lies, seems to need this. She is me. I don't trust her. My next poem is my one about concrete. I did my Arts Council project. I think it was before starting my PhD, and it's based on Barbara Hepworth and concrete. Reference book. You lend me a book that says concrete has a shelf life. You clarify the point by highlighting the text that says its lifespan is set by durability, which sounds both theoretical and fictitious. I'm thinking of 14 years. You say the real time frame is longer than a relationship can withstand. For the next 4 weeks, I time my climaxes. The clock's open yearn mimics a digital sculptural arc. My manifesto ends. In the book you lent me, the page we discussed is folded over discreetly. It smells of fuchsia, vulva, and 9 minutes of coming, which is in fact 14 years of lasting. And I'm going to read 2 more poems. The next one is Apricot. Apricot. We discuss the interior of a second like it is narrative strategy. For you, the second represents only a unit of time. With each millisecond, I fall in love with you more. I don't think you know. As your seconds tick, mine are scored open and dissected. Inside this apricot, the stone is missing, and I'm curled up in the pit where time should be. And my final poem is this one. I just want to say again, congratulations, JP, and thank you for asking me to read tonight. Self-floating form. On holiday, C and I swim topless in the sea. In the approach of a wave, I see Hepworth. In that moment of swell under the water, my breasts are sculpture proud, mounted on a personal plinth, complete, my nipples tiara against an endlessly repeated new start sky. A plane flies overhead, and I think of the times when I was cabin crew and looked down on this beach during the descent of a 40-minute flight. I wonder if looking down, I would see a self-floating, drifting away female figure who deliberately lets the tide remove her from the bag she leaves on the beach. Would she, I, stand up, act surprised that we, C and I, had drifted this far from where we started? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. I feel there's a wave of applause and love coming towards you and your work right now. Obviously, we're in Zoom land, so it always feels a little bit weird reading into a box, doesn't it? But I love your work and really inspired by actually the way you talk freely about so many important issues, and a real honour to have you blurb the book and also read tonight. So thank you so much for sharing your work. Mark, Antony, Owen, who I'm sure many of you here will know. Mark is an author, poet, of course. He has created this incredible digital project called Sabruria. I hope I pronounced that correctly, which if you've not come across, I'm going to put the link in the chat because it's just really stunning. I think it's a wonderful piece of work. And he is, of course, the creator and curator of the online poetry journals I Am and After. So it felt like a good collection, I suppose, with your interests and my work. And I've been lucky that Mark's published some of my work in those journals as well. So thank you, Mark, for being here. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, JP, and also thank you for having me here this evening among such many talented people and talented poets. I was stunned the first time I opened the book of yours when you sent it to me. I couldn't imagine so many different poems coming from one poet. It really was, as I said in the blurb, a feast. And obviously, as you know, there was a particular poem of yours that struck me quite quickly near the beginning, which I will read as the last of my 4 poems this evening. So, the first poem is one that I wrote after reading an obituary of Charlotte Coleman, the actress who many will know from Four Weddings and a Funeral and other places. It was the headline. It's my copywriting days coming through. The title comes from something that an ex-boyfriend of hers, Matt Jones, said at her funeral, at her memorial, and it's called "The Permanent Crisis of Loving Her." At some point in the last 2 years of her life, I narrowly avoided a collision with the actress Charlotte Coleman. I'd seen her as a child in the series Wurzel Gummidge, then later, as an adult, in the TV adaptation of Jeanette Winterson's first novel, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. The closest I ever came to a woman I didn't know, but had made a heroine. She stares at me now from a DVD case, kooky, pale and marmalade-haired, like the girl I still dream I'll bump into, fall in love with, the one whose passing you never get over, the one of whose life a childhood sweetheart speaks as the permanent crisis of loving her. Thank you. I didn't really have a theme as such, so not an ekphrastic theme this evening, but I guess, as is often with my work, loss comes up a lot, and the next poem is a very short poem written in memory of my best friend who died tragically when he was just 35. In memoriam. Dead long enough for the wood to grow green, he's still a name round here. A name, but no more. Across from the off license, he keeps company with men who drink in the day. Like you used to do, I remember. Now, I'll take a quick drink. The next poem is one that I wrote quite recently, and I took it for a little tour at the Cheltenham Poetry open mic recently. So I'm going to read it for only the second time here. It takes its title. This is actually an ekphrastic poem of sorts. It takes its title from a song, what's that song? A kind of a trance track from the 90s by an outfit called Union Jack. And it's called "There Will Be No Armageddon," and the line in the epigraph comes from the next line in the music, which is, "There will be no sudden ending. We will see our children grow, and theirs grow after them." A hard time, hoping, below the ache of air raid warnings, those wails of a wounded God. Hard, too, trusting in upturned furniture, blankets, tinned food, to repel the furnace heat of the world's white-hot anger. Whenever those sirens sang, we sheltered. Sorry, I'm just moving the thing out of the way. I'll start again from the middle. Sorry, the bar thing was in the way. Hard too, trusting in upturned furniture, blankets, tinned food, to repel the furnace heat of the world's white-hot anger. Whenever those sirens sang, we'd shelter under bedclothes, pray the linen that spared us the mauling of monsters' claws, the night intruder's axe blow, would help us survive the blasts of adults who swore those left living would envy the dead. Apologies there. And prep that properly. So the last poem I'm going to read this evening is called "The Voyage Out," after Virginia Woolf, and this is by JP herself. And it struck me because there was a poem I wrote also called "A Portrait of Virginia Woolf," and I sort of saw the correspondences between the two. The Voyage Out. Adeline lies resting now, safe from prying hands, at peace for 3 weeks, her soft body oozing. Sorry, I'll start again. Adeline lies resting now, safe from prying hands, at peace for 3 weeks, her soft, oozing body on the soft, muddy bed of the ooze. Surrendered to the waves, 22 days lost at sea. Leonard, if anybody could have saved me, it would have been you. Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much. I love your work, and it's always wonderful to hear you read it, which is what you've done so wonderfully with I Am, is to sort of create this space where you hear poets read their work, because other than poetry readings like this, it's very rare to get the opportunity, and it always sounds so much better when you sort of hear the poet read it themselves. So thank you for all you do for the community as well. We're sort of going to take a little bit of a break now. It's not actually a break. We're kind of roughly halfway through. I'm going to attempt to screen a sort of poetry film that I've made. It is a little long because it is a film version of the longest poem in White Cloud Over Purple, which is called Centosaurus. This is if my laptop manages to cope with that, so we'll try it. If for some reason you need to go and take a break, have a comfort break, or make a cup of tea, now is a good time to do it, because you need to be back to hear Briony Collins read, and then me finally at the end. But yeah, so Centosaurus is a poem that I wrote maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago. Like a lot of poems that I write, where I sort of just get a random crazy idea and then it sort of turns into a poem, and I think, well, that sort of works. And this book is essentially made up of quite a lot of those. So it was a cento is, like I'm sure most of you know, is a poem that sort of takes lines from other poems. This I sort of took to its logical conclusion, in that there's 100 lines, also cento, and I kind of gathered the lines, as it were, literally by randomly scrolling on an app that the Poetry Foundation have. This is sort of the America's kind of equivalent of our Poetry Society, and they have this great app, which was great sort of during lockdown, just to sort of read some poetry but not kind of commit to actually a full book. And I just sort of randomly chose lines and that I liked, that jumped out at me, wrote them down, and then sort of put them in some sort of order that maybe works, maybe doesn't. I mean, I'll leave that for you to decide. So here is my attempt at putting that into a sort of visual form. So let's see how this works. Water seeps through the ceiling. I sleep through everything, reaching out of our bodies for someone else, their loving weakness. You are young and pure and really just want to have a good time. But presently you feel that you will die, and the world is fast a-melting, although we have made love for the first time. It was fun getting used to you. Now it's ending among angels of flame and ice. Is it in the furious infinite, a sweet disorder in the dress? Glimpse your own face that weighs nothing and is burning. Let every river envy our mouths. You are the rain that visited the night before. If only I knew what you are doing now. On the darkening green there was an old man with a beard, old and blind and in love with light. Blind bones with their manipulating tendons, father absent in a void called work. Cowed, denatured, ceasing to be, prescribed by nature and ordained by God, while he wept with joy to hear. For his morning sacrifice, the people of coming days will know a bone sucked clean of its marrow. Bones, femur, spine, nakedness, cold and terror, in the dull shroud of mourning, and my sister entering the room quietly. Not always was her waiting played out as gestures of solitude, kept vigil over drunken, nodding remembrance, the way the body works against the possible, against the weakness of her own hands, so gentle, so familiar with devastation. She lay there reduced, neither virgin nor mother, everyone wanting to be soft, cooing sympathies. They had been kind to others all their lives, something you could not have thought possible. Their throats singed and swollen with song, pastimes of youth, sometime among the smiles of those who once were blessed, their transitory step and merriment. Instead of pines shall murmur in the wind, the ancient pulse of germ and birth. Apple trees, their fruit rotting in monochrome, the nation stirred in its husk and slept again. 8 times emerging from the flood, anachronistic fear, fight the fog, wind oozing thin through the thorn from Norwood. A war was almost certainly about to break out. Take a bus to the river. Quietly, we choke. The war came back to mind with the moonrise, the madness and the misery of men. I saw them turn and dwindle and felt unafraid. I take a can of ashes to the beach and empty them into the wind, where the skyline encircled the sea. From thoughts of my own death, I was free. This need to be needed, to belong, to know how. The echo of form without the wisdom. I howl effluvium, switchblade hue. Screaming does not indicate terror. I had so many soft wings that summer. Some say the world will end in fire, in the light beyond the overswirl, the sweet stink of your own charred flesh. Just as daylight surrenders to the moon, so death doth touch the resurrection. And I felt the heat like a wet brand in my chest. The strike of dawn, we skittered from shadows, seeking freedom becomes a harness to you. Falling short, surviving because we ducked, all that falls is caught, unless, up through the darkness, see everything, the dew, a moth turning to poison while the bee mouth sips. Broken wire, a hurricane at each end. It's true that fresh air is good for the body. On mountain and altar to whom both belong, she heard the whir of parrot wings, and the dark clouds seemed to frown. Thunder and lightning at the lightest touch, long lost to sun or moon or stars. We stared at the end, some lovely, glorious nothing I did see. The poem is always incomplete. The butterflies make it whole. Into something rich and strange, we play like children under the sun for future years. And so I dare to hope we shall tell them the truth. Ah, a forest of somethings. Chaos is endless longing. It's all echo, whatever world. All forests, stintless stars. This deliberate, this abrupt. Even if the sky is falling, wave your burning flags, O stars. Come on, rapture, let's go bedazzling. So we are now going to go back to our live readings and hear from Briony Collins. Where have you gone, Briony? There you are. Okay. Now, of course, Briony, I'm sure many of you will know, is the director, owner, founder, and editor-in-chief of Atomic Bohemian. But I asked her to read here because I'm just such an admirer of her work and inspired by how much she manages to do. So I'm going to quickly whiz through her bio because there's a lot. So Briony is an award-winning writer based in Wales. Her career began when she won the 2016 Exeter Novel Prize and has gained many publications since. She's the owner of the publishing house Atomic Bohemian, and editor at its parent project Cape Magazine. Briony is also on the Readers' Committee of Poetry Wales, and her publications include Blame It On Me, All That Glisters, The Birds, the Rabbits and the Trees, and Cactus Land. And next year, her debut novel is forthcoming from Barnard Publishing. I think she also has 2 forthcoming poetry books, which is a lot. And on top of all of that, somehow she's fitting in a PhD. So welcome, Briony. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you read.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Truthfully, I don't know how I get it all done. Copious amounts of caffeine and a slight thread of masochism, perhaps. But anyway, I'm going to read a kind of scattershot of poems today, but I wanted to start by thanking JP for inviting me here. As a fellow poet, it's really special. I know I published White Cloud Over Purple. Here it is. But to be here as a poet, alongside a poet like JP, who I deeply admire, but also Damien and Wendy and Mark, it's just really wonderful and the absolute highlight of my week for sure. Now, to bring the tone down, I'll start reading some of my poems. If you're familiar with my work, you know that I write a lot about my parents and kind of gender dynamics. So I want to start off by reading a piece from The Birds, the Rabbits, the Trees. This one's called What a Difference a Mother Could Make. I'm tired of her being dead. That isn't poetic of me, I know, but it's true. I'm tired. Winter morning, winter woman, the days are all outgoing. Instant black coffee and oranges, white veins peel away. She lingers under my nails. I long for her. Lessons on how to love, how to leave. The season reigns her absence. Many of my poems are quite short as well. I'm going to read, I think, from the end of this book, which is about kind of an imagined relationship between myself and my mother. She passed away a very long time ago, but I'm imagining kind of communicating with her in this sort of forest space, this dreamlike kind of forest space, and it moves between that area and into kind of my real life experiences in an abusive relationship. And so how kind of the loss of her was really also the loss of a role model, and how I sort of fell into some difficult relationships when I was older as a result. So this poem is called December, and it's about that dream space with my mum, that sanctuary, and my very real, very tumultuous, abusive relationship, those 2 spaces kind of converging and colliding. So this is December. Dear Mum, I almost killed someone, he said. Anger is white. It splits me open like the frantic froth of a waterfall, a current spilling from a ledge, punching into the gaping body beneath, writhing in its own tide. The white is on me when I cry, his pupils set into the frozen snow of his sclerae, deathly, deadly, searing like his white fist cut into the temple of an old man. His ankle cracks as he twists and storms out. I feel you bandage your fingers around mine, lead me to the forest. In the moonlit clearing is the hole where I first found it in the spring. Rabbits flank us, swarm our heels but never overtake. Wings of owls brush through the air. Your arms are all tremors and goose flesh. Squeeze my hand harder, face the chasm and stepping. We fall beyond the sounds of the birds, the rabbits, the trees. The open grave of my mind where I meet you every night of my life. I wish I had prepared the sort of explanation before the reading because it requires quite a lot of context. Anyway, the next poem I'm going to read isn't out yet. It's from a forthcoming pamphlet that I'm putting out with Atomic Bohemian called I Know Where the Pelicans Go. And in it, I'm trying to look at my father from perhaps a more gracious perspective. He and I don't really have the best relationship. So this piece is called Be a Man. It doesn't get worse than that. The blood moon floats up like an oil drop, while field mice billow in the tall fescue. There are gaps between words that stars fill, you spilling out of yourself, the fat rivulets of boyhood threading into your cotton pajamas. Tug an ear tune bear to the window. Night unrolls like a velvet rug, cow tongue black and saliva wet. The dark was made for eating. Pluck a currant from the sky, devour your wish, your ripe youth. These digestible hours will rot if you don't. Now, I'm just going to read two more, and they're slightly happier, you will be pleased to know. But this next one just came out in this anthology For a Friend by Lucent Dreaming. It was actually meant to be in The Birds, the Rabbits, the Trees, but I had to pull it out so that I could have it here. And it's about the power of a good friend, somebody who can help bring you out of a dangerous or a difficult situation. That is absolutely my friend Lewis. So this next poem is called For Lewis. The driveway of my mind is gravel. It flies up if I move too fast. He sees my face and knows, takes me by the crook of my arm, leads me outside the pub to the road, away from the music. We are green, LED beaming above the doorway, emerald flecks in his eyes, glass bottles swilling their elixir. We are spring adjacent, tree cells whistling in their chlorophyll, moss swelling between bricks, dampening in the midnight of roofs. He sees my face and knows, says the only colours on this road are high-vis yellow and siren red, no green at all. I look at him and see spring, see leaves and moss and life, hang myself around his neck and choose. I'm going to end with a poem that I like to have a bit of a narrative during my readings. You might have picked up on that. This poem has nothing to do with anything I've just read, but it is an after poem. And as we are all here today to celebrate JP, I thought I would read it. It's after the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer called Restless. So this is Watching Restless. She's writing a poem on her girlfriend's back, Sappho of Lesbos in the red womb wrappings of their room, nothing outside but the desert. Like the silver inch plant, wandering Rosenberg, striping its way along a shelf. Tradescantia zebrina comes. She strokes patterns of Greek either side of the spine, the hollow and small, the length and bone, this arresting flesh, searching to name themselves in this oasis, the wild spring of their bodies. And that is my reading. Thank you so much for listening. JP, do you want me to?
Well, I just want to say thank you first,
Okay.
Briony, because that was gorgeous. I mean, I love your work, and your poems are so tender, yet so powerful. They pack such a punch, and there's a lot in there. And it was really lovely to hear you read. So thank you so much for sharing your work.
I also published White Cloud Over Purple, as I said, and I really have to say that JP is just unlike anyone else. This is an absolutely incredible book. I'll put a link in the chat shortly. But you know, I'm sure everyone here already knows JP, but I do have to say this is such a gorgeous book inside and out. JP, I don't know how you do it. I'm really excited to hear you read, so please dive in.
Thank you, Briony, and thank you everyone for your exceptionally kind words. So I'm going to share something, but also just to show you the book. So thank you, Briony, for publishing this. Just to say, this started life as a pamphlet, a slightly odd collection of bits and pieces that happen to be all after poems, because I quite like writing stuff that's inspired by other pieces of art or other writers. And it sort of grew somewhat in the sort of last editing stage. So I'm hugely grateful for Atomic Bohemian to allow for that sort of late growth spurt. So it's sort of now hitting sort of nearly 80 pages, I think. So definitely longer than a pamphlet. I want to check, can people see the screen okay now? Yeah, I think so. So that's the cover. I'm going to quickly say something on that. Some of you might have gathered, obviously I chose this because it's an abstract piece of art, which makes a lot of sense when you read some of the pieces in the book, because there's quite a lot that relates to abstract art. The title, White Cloud Over Purple, is after a Rothko painting, and there's a poem in there which sort of it's actually based on a short story of mine, which sort of examines parts of Rothko's life and his paintings and someone's response to those, particularly the Seagram murals that he produced. The painting was produced by my daughter, who was around 18 months perhaps at the time when she delivered this piece of art. And I loved it, I think, because of the colours, and then it felt like a good fit for this book. I got her permission to do that, and she's very proud of the fact that it's now our book. So that's quite nice. So the White Cloud Over Purple is split into 4 sections. Sorry, this is just how slow my laptop is. Words, sound, image, and found. So it's sort of technically 4 sections. And the reason that the found section is essentially the acknowledgements, but actually the inspiration for these poems and perhaps some of the stories behind these poems was, for me at least, just as important as what I had kind of created out of them. So I will stop waffling and start reading. So this first one is from the words section, and it's actually the poem that Mark shared earlier in the chat, which he graciously published in the After Journal. I was reading Sylvia Plath's Tulips a couple of years ago. That was the first time I'd come across that poem, and I felt there was another poem in there sort of trying to get out. So I will. This is called Lips, which is after Sylvia Plath, and it's essentially an erasure poem from her original Tulips. Lips. It is winter here. Quiet, I am myself, nobody, nothing. I have given up my history. My head shut everything in. Impossible body, smoothing numbness, I have lost myself. Sick of smiling, hanging, swabbed. Loving, scared. I have never been pure. Lie, empty, free. Ask nothing. Dead mouths, lips are too red. They hurt me. Their redness, my wound. Sudden tongues round my neck. I watch. Lips turn to me, slowly widen, shadow the sun. I have no face. Vivid lips, eat the air, breath-filled like a river. Sunken walls, warming lips, like dangerous animals, opening the mouth of my heart. Red blooms, I taste the sea. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one, conscious of time. So this next one is a golden shovel. And there's a few golden shovels in the book. I got a little bit obsessed with these for a while. And I wrote this, I think, in 2022, which was the centenary year of the Wasteland, if I've remembered correctly. And it is, of course, a golden shovel that takes each word at the end of each line is the title of the sections of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And this is sort of what came out of that exercise, if you like. Centenary prayer. Sparking with electric fluorescence, the cigarette a talisman, our table a burial of spilt wine, broken bread, an exchange of ideas and dreams gestated in the crucible of youth, once living, now dead. Pick a card, any card. You choose a world reversed, dismissed, just a game, smile fixed on your face, new bottle of wine to soak the sweat. You prefer chess. Last orders, our time is ending, and the unreal moon, ash-struck by sunfire, swollen with words, finishes its sermon. We listen, reflecting our lives in its death, this grey orb measuring our tides by its circling envy of each drop of water, each blade of grass, every grain of sand, whatever can be held in the hand, be it fear or the prick of hope in our hearts, as the thunder lies in our throats, demanding truth is said. Okay, I'm going to quickly stop sharing and share something else, because now I'm going to read Mark's wonderful poem, also for Virginia Woolf. I hope you can read that, see that okay. A portrait of Virginia Woolf. It was lovely when Mark read the book and blurbed it and then told me about his poem, and I read this and loved it, and then sort of offered these insights regarding music that was played at Virginia Woolf's funeral, which I wasn't aware of. So it was great to kind of to get into that and go all geeky about Virginia Woolf. This is a gorgeous poem that's part of his Suburia project. Dropping off our daughter at your flat. I see you've bought a portrait of Virginia Woolf. It's a picture of her I've not seen in years, not since I read Vita's love letters to her. You can tell she was troubled, even in this, almost feel the weight that would pull her under. Like her, we share that unsteadiness of mind, streams of consciousness deep enough to drown in. But while you see only her photograph's age, I hear blessed spirits dancing her to rest. So thank you, Mark, for letting me read that. So I'm going to move on to the next section in the book, and which is on sound. And as a few people have already very kindly mentioned, there's quite a lot of variation of form in this book, which was very deliberate. It's sort of very playful. I don't really tend to take myself too seriously as a poet, perhaps despite some of the subjects I often write about. I kind of still feel like I'm winging it and making up as I go along, which is fine. I usually am. So this is also, it happens to be a Erasure poem, and it's after John Cage, who I'm a big fan of his work, and a series of lectures that he delivered on silence, essentially. If you've heard of John Cage, he's the one that wrote 4.33 and lots of other work that has more noise in it. And I was reading his lecture and copying a PDF version of it, as well as the book that I have of them. And this was a sort of happy accident in the PDF sort of glitched, and I kind of created a poem, I suppose, out of the way that it glitched on the page. It's called I Am Here. I am here, and there are silences, and that is poetry. Who knows, in spite of himself, for we possess nothing. We need not destroy the past. We carry our homes within us, even those rare moments of ecstasy. Each moment is absolute. Nothing is anonymous. I remember loving. It became something by not being nothing. I have the feeling that we are getting nowhere. Quiet sounds were like loneliness. You are like a ghost. Let him go to sleep. Slowly. That is a pleasure. We can fly from here. I mentioned Rothko already and a lot of abstract artists. This is after Cornelia Parker's kind of sculpture, hanging sculpture. I don't know if any of you will have seen it. It's called Cold Dark Matter, and it's Exploded Shed. And I remember seeing it in the Tate a long time ago. And I thought, well, it can't really be a poetry book by me without having a little bit of trauma in there. So here is a little bit of trauma. Not too much, but at least a kind of content warning for you. Cold Dark Matter. Returning again to Cornelia Parker's Exploded Shed, I reflect on how little we've both changed over the years. Fragments of splintered wood hanging in suspended animation. When I first saw the work in 1997, I felt something shift inside my body. A recognition that this is what it feels like. Trauma frozen in time and space. Thousands of tiny shards slowly twisting, but not touching. A sum of the whole in stasis, without resolution. And now, 20-something years later, I visit the moment of explosion again and feel the splinters still buried in my limbs. Tiny thorns lodged in my side, twisting, but not touching. Okay, and if you will bear with me, I'm going to read one more. This is the last one. So this is called I Titled, and it's towards the end where I've got several poems that relate to some sort of queer heroes of mine, queer artists and creators, Derek Jarman, Paul Feck, which is what this one is after, Peter Hujar, Claude Cahoon, and others. And this was a poem that I originally wrote in a call out for Pilot Press. They put together a series of art books that responded to artwork that was created during the early 90s and the height of the AIDS crisis, at least in the Western world. And this is an ekphrastic poem referring to a piece of art, which if I'd had time, I would have got up on the screen to show you, but sadly not. So here it goes. There is, as with the Derek Jarman, where there's also a poetry film that I've created and a QR code in the book, if you want to go and see that. This is also something I turned into a sound piece afterwards, which was broadcast on NTS Radio. So a lot of these are works that I've sort of come back to and kind of created other forms in them. I titled, "There is a man standing in the window. There is a man standing in the window is a man. A man is standing there in the window. Look, over there, at the window, at the man standing. He balances on one leg, his other in a bucket of concrete. Not concrete, but plaster. He is making a plaster cast of his leg. He is against interpretation, art and all its metaphors. It's just a leg, a reliquary of war, of the tomb, of a life cut short. The eyes of stars are scattered, blinking out, one by one, all those beautiful boys, Andy's boys, winking at the screen test, puffing out their chests, their cocks jutting forth earnestly, honestly, their comet will not shine alone. In wind and sun and rain, these mangled flowers and lesser shadows. The sky is a purple rain haze. The stars are brilliant specks of light, pricking my eyes, poking them out. The invisible sun stretches across the corn. Clouds race across the sea. Whose light shines on the flower of the morning of a world confined by colour? The egg has entered the waters of heavens. The egg is opening. It bursts forth from its eye a yellow yolk doused in purple paraffin. Fly away, Peter, fly away, Paul, standing at the gates of heaven, standing naked, tall, black and white, imperial purple with threads of gold. You will never grow old. We give thanks and praise to the brave that died in darkness, in fear, solitude. We wait for the wild spring. It's coming. The heavens have foretold it. The shining comet reflects the stars in our eyes, echoes the egg of hearts, the wood of pines, cloven, hooved, smell their scent. We're coming, comet clothed, in glory. Hallelujah. Thank you so much for listening and for allowing me to read you an exceptionally abstract poem, but it felt appropriate given the start and the cover and many of the ideas in the book. So I think we're running out of time. I'm grateful for your comments, which I've not had the chance to see. Briony, forgive me, I didn't manage to put your links in the chat, but I can do that now. But I would like to say a huge thanks to everyone for coming and for being here and listening and supporting me and this book, and for our wonderful readers, Damien, Donnelly, Wendy, Allen, Mark, Antony, Owen, and Briony Collins. Thank you all so much for your support and for your readings.